Good morning, my friends. Let's open a Bible to Psalm 42. Psalm 42 is going to be in the blue Bibles on page 519 in the blue Bibles. 519 in the blue Bibles. Psalm 42. Now, if you came this morning without a Bible because you don't own one in a translation that you could read or understand, we want you to take that home with you. We believe the Bible is how people are transformed because it is literally the Word of God. God speaking to us and teaching us. And so we want you to have a copy that you will read and take home. So that's our gift to you. So I have a confession to make. We have three of the songs that we sang this morning that were Christmas songs, all Christmas songs. All three of them at least had minor chords in them, and two of them were in minor keys. And I really, really like Christmas songs in minor keys. Now, if you're not a musical person, then I'm just going to nerd out for a second. You just come right back around in just a second. But the reason that I like that is because there's this tension that you feel in the way a song in a minor key is done. And that's what you're supposed to feel at Christmas, right? Because it is the incarnation. And for sure, Christ has come. And that is great news. But that's not the end of the great news, right? We're going to go forward in the gospel, and we're going to see this same Jesus live a perfect life and yet be condemned by his own brothers and then killed, murdered, so that we would live forever. And there's this tension that moves us from Christmas into Easter, where I tell people then we ought to be blowing the doors off the church with celebration at Easter, right? And so sometimes we get that a little flip-flopped. We certainly celebrate Christmas. I celebrate Christmas. That's a thing that I do. But we do so with this tension that we should feel. And what we've done is we've made this holiday all superficial joy in many ways. That there's this sense of we're supposed to be happy because it's Christmas. Like literally people say that. And yet, really, you don't read that in the scriptures anywhere. You know, for many, even the day that Jesus was born, many, many children were killed. It was not a great day for many people. And so there's this tension that lives in us, and that's why we did this whole sermon series called Christmas Questions. We wanted to talk about some of the things that maybe we feel like we're not allowed to talk about at Christmas. So we talked about busyness and how we wrestle with that. We talked about family and how we deal with those crazy people. We talked about money and how we handle not having the money that we think we should have or redefining what a good Christmas should be. We've talked through last week grief. And how we grieve well at Christmas, because Christmas for many of us is a time where we remember either what we don't have or what we used to have. And so today, we're really not going to lighten it up any. We're going to talk about depression. Because there is real medical statistical data that says that more people are depressed, not just at Christmas, but in the wintertime than any other time of the year. Now, some of this is because literally the amount of sunshine has changed. There's an actual disorder called seasonal affective disorder that really does make a difference when the days are shorter and it's dark all the time. You know, like it's the feeling of going, when you go to work, it's dark, and then when you drive home, it's dark, and you forget that the sunshine exists. And it really can wear on you after a while. But for some people, it's not just the sunshine, it's the season in general, right? Christmas itself can bring, for many of us, a weight, a heaviness, or an anxiety that creates really the best way we could put it is a depression. I mean, bad memories or emptiness, the longing for the things we don't have. For many, Christmas is not so much a time for joy. It feels like a time for lament. The problem is, as a Christian culture, we kind of live on two polar extremes when it comes to depression or lament in general. Right? We have one group that live in just this silent pain and never express what we're actually feeling. I think in many ways that is even more true for the generations that were probably older than I, who were always taught that that's what you did. You pushed it down, you didn't deal with it, you didn't let it come out, you just buried it. And then eventually it will come out in really bad ways. I liken it to a pressure cooker. My mom used to use a pressure cooker. You know what those things are? They call it Instapots now. But back in the day, they used to have a little thing that rattled. You always knew when there was something good cooking because you could hear the rattling outside with the windows open. But if you leave that thing on the fire for too long, it's sealed up perfectly tight. But if you leave it on, you let it get too hot, too much pressure, you know what happens to the lid? Boom! right? You have an explosion. That's often how we have been taught to deal with our emotional range as Christians. So we just keep it in, keep it in, we keep it in, we keep it in, we keep it in, and then one day the lid blows off. Boom! And then we all look around confused and go, I wonder what happened to that person. Well, they've been left on the fire too long. We're not intended to do that, right? And we know we're not intended to do that because we have the whole book of Psalms. The book of Psalms deals with this great emotional range. So you've got these people who don't deal with it at all in some sort of silent pain and live with this pressure that continues to build in themselves. But then you've got the other polar extreme, and that's the people who put everything they're feeling on Facebook all the time, right? Neither of these are good. You know these folks. These are the folks who, if anything happens, it's going to be everywhere for everyone to see on social media. Neither of these things are really healthy. There's got to be a good way to deal with this. But then what happens is we end up with really unhelpful phrases that we have perpetuated as true but are not biblical. Like, why in the world are you depressed? Christians don't get depressed. There's a word for that. Baloney. You know how I know that? Psalm 42, which is what we're reading today. So we've bought into this idea that Christians are supposed to really just be happy all the time. And if you let yourself buy into that sort of pressure, well, then all you do is just build more pressure in yourself, right? Because you don't feel happy. Happiness is not how I'm going to describe how I'm feeling at this very moment, but I know that all Christians are supposed to be happy all the time, and I'm not happy. Must not be a Christian. And so we make all these unhealthy sort of associations where we're connecting things that the Bible does not connect. And one of the big traps we can fall into as Christians is to try to connect dots that the Bible never connects. And those two things, those two ideas, is there a time for happiness? Most certainly. Is Christmas a happy time for many of us? Absolutely. Is Christmas a happy time for all of us? Nope. That's okay. Psalm 42, however, doesn't just leave us with the reality of the fact that we feel these things, that we deal with the weight of these things. It actually gives us an action plan on what to do when we feel these things. Like, you ever thought about that? Wouldn't it be nice if the Bible told me what to do when I was really depressed? I have some really great news. It does. However, it is not fast. It is not quick. And it is not easy. It's soul work. And the reality is, depression for many of us is far more than an emotional thing. It's a soul thing. The Bible is full, church history is full of many men and women who wrestled with depression over the course of their life. One of my favorite men in church history, Charles Spurgeon, wrote a whole chapter. I tell people one of the most helpful chapters I've ever read in any book was written by a guy named Charles Spurgeon, probably greatest preacher in the history of Protestant preachers. Wrote a chapter in a book called Lectures to My Students. The name of the chapter was The Minister's Fainting Fits. Now, fainting is not like we think. We think fainting like my blood sugar's low, so I'm going to hit the floor. Charles Spurgeon, when he used it, he meant more just emotional fainting, feeling weak and depressed and anxious. And he just brought to bear the reality of this, not just in the pastor's life, but in the Christian existence. And how to wrestle with that was very helpful. Martin Lloyd-Jones went through long years of depression, and from it wrote a book called Spiritual Depression, one of the most helpful books you'll ever read on depression. It's not super riveting. You have to make yourself read it at points. But boy, can it be helpful. Right? And so you see this over and over. The Bible. We have multiple examples of people who've wrestled with depression, and we don't have to get very far out of the Psalms to read them. But we see lament happening in the course of the Scriptures. And we're going to see that happen today. And I want us to learn how we can move through a season of darkness and towards hope in God-honoring ways through reading Psalm 42 and studying it together. So would you read with me Psalm 42? As a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me all day long, where is your God? These things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I would go with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God with glad shouts and songs of praise. Multitude keeping festival. Why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. My soul is cast down within me. Therefore, I remember you. From the land of Jordan and Hermon, from Mount Mizar, deep calls to deep, the roar of your waterfalls. All your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day, the Lord commands his steadfast love, and at night, his song is with me. A prayer to the God of my life. I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go on mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? As with a deadly wound in my bones, my adversaries taunt me, while they say to me all day long, where is your God? Why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. Would you pray with me? Father, as we read and study this psalm together, help our hearts and our souls to hope in God. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So the psalmist's prescription for those of us who are wrestling with depression revolves around three words: yearning, groaning, preaching. Yearning, groaning, preaching. First, we yearn to see God. Look at how the psalmist starts here. You almost start with the impression that this is going to be like a really upbeat, joyful psalm. Like, listen to how passionate he is for God when he says, as the deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. Like, you get, man, he's really got it. This is what it feels to walk through the Christian life. And then as we read the rest of the psalm, we get it. Yeah, this is what it feels to walk through the Christian life. As the deer pants, he's yearning. What is he yearning for? Most often, as we wrestle through depression, whether it be at Christmas time or any other time of the year, there is this yawning yearning to have something in our soul. The problem is, we don't often rightly diagnose what it is we're yearning for. It's kind of like in our culture, there's a lot of data that says quite often when we feel hungry, what we actually are is thirsty. You ever heard this? That we eat so much sodium and we fail to take the right amount of fluids in, that actually what's happening is our body is thirsty, but we misdiagnose that feeling, and our body learns to eventually replace the yearning for water with just a yearning for more food. And so instead of giving our bodies what we actually need, water, we give our bodies what we actually don't need, donuts. And so you get this horrible misexchange, and the donuts can make me feel good for a little while, but then you know what happens? I'm still thirsty. And so I feel like I'm hungry for more, right? But that's what we do emotionally as well. So much of the yearning in our souls that leads us to this wrestling through depression is actually a yearning to be with and see and experience God, because that's what we've been created for. It was Augustine who said, our hearts are restless until we find our rest in God. But we misdiagnose that restlessness with the restlessness for other things. So look at what the psalmist is yearning for. The first thing he does is confess his actual yearning is for the presence of God. You know, isn't it interesting? This is going to be a psalm. You read it, it's full of suffering and hardship and pain. You know what he's not yearning for here is the end to the suffering? Never does he actually say, I'm just looking forward to the day where all this suffering's over with. But what he does say is he's yearning for the presence of God. There's this anxious feeling that comes along with depression. I would say as a disclaimer, if you've never actually struggled with depression, then I would consider yourself fortunate. But many of us, at least through some seasons of our lives, will engage with and experience depression. And there's an anxiety and an anxiousness that goes along with that. C.S. Lewis wrote a book called A Grief Observed. He wrote it right after his wife died. And one of the lines that has always stuck with me when he wrote this is, "No one told me that grief felt so much like fear." There's this anxiousness that happens. What is that? That's a yearning for the presence of God. But not just that. Look here, he yearns for the people of God, right? He says, "My soul thirsts for God," in verse 2, "for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God?" He describes his lament, "My tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me, where is your God? These things I remember." Look at what he remembers as I pour out my soul. "How I would go with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God with glad shouts and songs of praise, a multitude keeping festival." He reminds himself of the day when he came to worship and he led people in joyous and joyful worship before the to say, this is how great God is. And some of us have the privilege of doing that often, and then sometimes that feels like it withers away because of the cares and the difficulties of life. That's where he's at. He's reminding himself, this is a yearning to be with the people of God and celebrating the goodness of God. It's a helpful reminder for us to know that one of the great enemies of the tool, one of the great tools of the enemy, that was totally backwards, one of the great tools of the enemy as we wrestle through depression is isolation. One of the strategies is get you away from other people. Why? Because if you get away from other people, things immediately will become much worse than they were before you were with other people. Right? Because you don't have people to bounce things off of. You don't have people to encourage you. When you isolate yourself, you feed depression. And yet that's the one thing you want to do is not be around anybody. And it's the worst thing for you is to not be around anybody. In the same sort of way, it's like when you run a fever and you're cold, what's the one thing you want to do? You want to grab every blanket in the house and lay under them. But you're running a fever. That's not a good idea. Why? Because all it's doing is making you hotter. Emotionally, you're feeling like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to warm up. You never warm up. You're just sweating and getting hotter. Temperature's going up. Isolation in the midst of depression is the same exact thing. You feel like if I could just get away from people, I'll be fine. You won't be fine. You won't be fine. He yearns for the people of God and the presence of God. You're wrestling with depression any time of the year. There is a need to be around others. Because one of the other nefarious backsides of depression is it causes you to be very self-reflected, looking inward only at my problems and not thinking about the needs of others. And that's the total opposite of Philippians 2, right? Consider others as greater than yourself. And what happens in depression is we tend to think of ourselves as greater than others. We don't want to put it that way because that sounds really harsh. And I don't mean for it to sound harsh, but it's what we do. We can't get past our own problems. We can't think past ourselves. And one of the best things that can happen for us is to start thinking of others. The Christian life was built for service and the service of others. And when we only serve ourselves and then long for the whole rest of the world to serve us, we just feed the thing that's driving us further down. We must yearn for the presence of God and yearn for the people of God. But look at what he also does. There's groaning. That's the second thing. Yearning, groaning before God. There's a big difference between groaning before God about our circumstances and grumbling to God about our circumstances. Right? Now, you know this in your own life. Many of us can discern the difference between someone groaning and someone grumbling. Groaning is what's happening here in Psalm 42. Grumbling is what happened in the wilderness in Egypt. Okay? The children of Israel have gotten out. They've been freed by the hand of God, led by a pillar of fire, a pillar of smoke, given manna from heaven, and they get tired of eating the thing that was created by God for the provision of their people, so they start to grumble and complain and say things like, when we were in Egypt, we don't have cucumbers in the wilderness. God must be holding out on us. If only we had cucumbers and watermelons, everything would be great. God has freed these people from slavery. He's guiding them. Their shoes aren't wearing out. They've been given. All they got to do is walk out of their tents and pick the manna every day. Go home and eat. And they're complaining because they don't have a particular type of fruit. That's grumbling. Groaning is to talk to God about the reality of your circumstances and how you're actually feeling. Not because He doesn't know, but because He desires relationship. And part of relationship is just honest conversation. Friends, we have got to learn how to have honest conversation with God. And part of that honest conversation with God is groaning. The psalmist teaches us how to do that here. Look at what he says. My soul is cast down within me. He reminds himself, verse 9, I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? The first of two questions that he asks as he groans before God. Have you ever, friend, felt forgotten by God? It's okay to say yes. Right? I'm not looking for Sunday school answers. We're looking for real answers. Have you ever felt forgotten by God? You're in good company. Not only did the psalmist feel forgotten by God, what was Jesus' cry from the cross? My God, why have you forsaken me? The difference is Jesus didn't just feel forsaken. He was forsaken. That's where preaching is going to come in, right? He spoke a reality. We speak a reality that's based on our perception. We feel as though God has forgotten us. Now, let's go ahead and get this out the way. Has God forgotten us? No. Boy, we feel that way. And so did the psalmist. I'm going to say two things here. First, for the one who's asking this question. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you are there. Maybe you're saying it exactly like the psalmist would say. I say to God, my rock. Isn't it interesting? You get what he does here? I say to God, my rock. Why have you forgotten me? Why has my rock forgotten me? He's still going to be preaching truth to himself, still saying, I know that God is my rock. And yet, I feel forgotten. So to the one who's asking this question, friends, the hope is that Jesus said this, and he was forsaken, and Jesus was forsaken by the Father to bear the wrath of the curse, to bear the sin that we deserve judgment for, so that we would never be forsaken or forgotten. Our hope in the midst of not feeling the presence of God is that the truth of the gospel is more true than our feelings. Because the gospel of Jesus Christ is not based on a feeling. It's based on a fact. The certainty of the resurrection is our hope. Not that we always feel it. Sometimes you just don't feel it. But the fact of the resurrection. We are allowed to ask God questions that inspired writers asked rightly of God. This is an example of that. Why have you forgotten me? We can tell God, God, I feel like I'm alone. I feel like I'm abandoned, but we don't stop there. That's where the third word is going to be so important. So listen to me carefully. You totally can say that. I want you to say that, but I don't want you to stop there. I want you to go on to the next step. Now, let me say just a quick word about the one who might be hearing this question. If you have the privilege of walking through life with a person who's struggling, wrestling with depression, then you may get a question like this where they say, I just feel like God has abandoned me. Can I encourage you that probably the least helpful thing you could do in that moment is to correct their theology? There will be a time where you can probably correct that. But that is not that time. If a person honestly trusts you to the point of being able to say that, then you are not supposed to try to fix them right then. Right? Job had this problem. The book of Job. You know what happens is Job laments. You know, the only time Job's friends did anything right was when they said what? Nothing. They sat down and mourned with him. And then they started speaking, and that's where it all went downhill. Right? But he looks at Eliphaz in the middle of the book of Job, and he says, do you intend, because Eliphaz's whole speech is reproving some words that Job said, trying to fix Job, if you will. And he looks at Eliphaz and he says, do you intend to reprove my words when the words of one in despair belong to the wind? An interesting thought. The words of one in despair belong to the wind. You know what that means? That means sometimes we say things we don't mean when we're hurting. And sometimes we say things that we know aren't true when we're hurting. But if we're correcting them, we're doing nothing other than trying to reprove the wind itself. It won't change things. If you have the privilege of walking with a person who's wrestling with depression, it is not your job to fix them. It is your job to love them. It is your job to be kind to them and give them time. And sometimes to say nothing, because nothing is almost always better than the something that comes to your mind at first. So be careful. Let people groan before God. And wait. This timing is everything. So much of what we say could be taken so much differently if we would just wait a minute and let people express how they're feeling. And then, when the time is right, teach them. Groaning before God is an essential part of moving well through grief, through loss, through depression, through the unmet yearnings of a soul. The psalmist does this. We can do this. But we can't stop there. And that's where the third step comes in. Preaching. We preach truth to ourselves. Over and over again, the thing that this psalmist does is he says what he feels, and then he says what is true. That is a helpful practice in our lives. To say what we feel, and then to say what is true. And I think it's a necessary part of wrestling well through depression, anxiety, fearfulness, loss, grief. Say what you feel, say what is true. Look at what he says. 5 steps of preaching truth to ourselves, the psalmist says here. First he says this, God is near. Look at verse 5. Why are you cast down, O my soul? So he talks first to his soul. And why are you in turmoil within me? He's preaching to himself. Martin Lloyd-Jones, the book Spiritual Depression. It's one of my very favorite lines. He says, we would be far better off if we would spend more time talking to ourselves than listening to ourselves. In other words, often we listen. We voices in our head, if you will, far more than we talk to them. And what happens is those voices in your head, they almost never have your best interest in mind. Right? That's your perception of what is true. We've got to take those perceptions of what is true and compare them to what the Bible says is really true. So he's taking his soul to task here. He's saying, soul, why are you downcast? What is the problem, soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? He feels that turmoil, that anxiousness. Why are you? And then he gives himself this reminder. Hope in God. For I shall, again, praise him, my salvation and my God. He reminds himself that God is near. He reminds himself that there will one day be a day where he will again praise him. And you know what the interesting implication of this is? Right now, in this moment when he's writing this psalm, what does he not feel like he's doing? He doesn't feel like he's praising God. Now, we know that he is. He doesn't feel that way. Interesting that you can actually use the depression that you're wrestling with to praise God. We typically only associate the praise of God with happy emotions, right? Baloney. The Bible doesn't do that. Every emotion should be called to task so that it praises God. He reminds himself that God is near. Then he reminds himself that God is merciful. He reminds himself, just like the psalmist in Psalm 23, that his mercy will never abandon us. He is for us, even in circumstances that don't feel merciful. He has tuned my heart to be able to praise. Third, he reminds himself that God is his rest. Rest will come again. So he says, I will again praise him. My soul is cast down, therefore I remember you. In verse 6, deep calls to deep. All your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day the Lord commands his steadfast love, And at night, his song is with me. You get that nearness of God? Nighttime is the worst time, isn't it? You ever been depressed? Nighttime is the worst, because you know what you want to do more than anything in this world? Sleep. You know what you can't do? Sleep. You either don't sleep at all or you sleep too much. And he reminds himself in the midst of the night, the song of God is with me. So he reminds himself that God himself is our rest. That's Psalm 4:8, right? You know what Psalm 4:8 says? In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you, O Lord, make me to dwell in safety. In the midst of the nighttime, when all you're left with is your thoughts and your feelings, you know that it's God who causes us to dwell in safety. If I am in Christ, no matter the depth of the anxiety or the depression or the melancholy that I'm feeling, it is temporary, because God will raise my head. So he reminds himself of that. Fourth, God will raise my head. My mourning is for a season. I shall again praise him. This is solely possible because of an active God who acts on my behalf and in my soul to remind me of what I have in Christ and who I have in Christ. And so finally, I will again praise God. Sometimes it's hard. And so he preaches to himself, hope in God. Hope is the activity that he is engaging in, not just the outcome of that activity. You get that? Sometimes we feel like the activity, the outcome of the work is hope. We're supposed to be working to hope in God. God expects us to wrestle in the dark times, hope in him, because we will again praise him one day. Now, what's fascinating about this psalm is that phrase, hope in God, for I shall again praise him, occurs twice. You get that in one song? The psalmist had to remind himself of this truth twice. Why? Because we are forgetful people. Sometimes we forget things that are super important. So the psalmist provides for us a model. You don't just say it once. You say it until you believe it. You say it until you can see that there will be a day. That's why it's slow work, right? We want to do something one time and it be done. I want to do this. Give me this 5-step process, God, on how I can just kind of walk through this thing and be done and over with. I can't do that for you. No one can. The Scriptures don't do that. The Scriptures teach us that this is a laborious thing. It's a thing that requires great effort and intention, and you do it over and over and over again. And you go through this cycle, yearning. I'm yearning for God. This feeling in my soul is really somehow a misguided yearning or actual yearning for God. So the thing that I think that I actually need is really me just trying to replace this need that I have for God. And so I want to groan before God after I yearn. Once I realize that I'm yearning, I'm going, God, this is how life feels for me right now. And then I preach. But I know who you are. And I know that when I rest and trust in you, I will again praise him. And we're just incredibly dissatisfied that does not work instantaneously. But the reality is, friends, the good things, the true things in the Christian faith are almost never instantaneous. They require time, effort, and patience. And the three things that we like least about life in general often are time and effort and patience. But when we apply these things, we find that God shows himself to us in different ways, changes us in ways that we were not prepared. And we begin to see that those times where I experience depression and loss are times that God is conforming me to his image, and that would not have been achieved if I had not gone through this season of difficulty. The great promise is not even that there will be a day where you will totally overcome depression. The great promise is that you will never be there alone. That God is honored when we wrestle with wherever we are emotionally and we do it well. What's even more amazing is how this psalm And this conversation about depression teaches us so much about the reality of what Christmas was supposed to be. You think about yearning, this idea of yearning for God. What is the creation doing? It's yearning and groaning for its salvation to come. And yet it couldn't be affected by anyone here on earth. Had to be brought in from the outside. Had to come from heaven. God himself had to come to redeem people. The whole message of Christmas, the creation groaned under the weight of the curse. We yearn to be reunified with God now as believers, to walk in the garden again like we did. The whole earth groaned. And so God promised hope. And that hope came first in a cradle, born in a manger in Bethlehem. But that was not the end of the hope, right? If Jesus was just born, then we are still lost. The hope is in the completed work of Christ. So fascinating that the time that is supposed to produce hope in God for us quite often just produces for us stress and anxiety and pressure because we have focused on the wrong things, in the wrong ways, and in the wrong times. Friends, we must root our hope in God. We must totally focus on Him. Preach this truth to ourselves, even and especially when the darkness doesn't lift. In the midst of stubborn, emotional darkness, we preach the truth to ourselves. I must hope in Him. And we do that this time of year by seeing this season for what it actually is supposed to be, and that is the hope of the gospel, the coming of the one that our hearts are yearning for, the incarnation of the one who hears our groans and one day will wipe our tears and promises us that change is coming. And so we preach that truth to ourselves so that one day we may again hope in God. Now, I hope you've noticed that so far I've preached all these sermons with the same conclusion. How do we handle the busyness at Christmas? We hope in God. How do we handle difficult family situations at Christmas? We hope in God. How do we handle grief at Christmas? We hope in God. How do we handle depression? We hope in God. What do we do if we feel like we can't provide a good Christmas for our children? We hope in God. There's really only one conclusion to all 5 of these sermons, and it is hope in God. And that's the whole point of this series. That's what we're going to talk about on Christmas Eve when we come for the candlelight service. That's going to be the whole sermon. Hope in God. Because that's what Christmas is. It's pointing us to our true hope. And so much of the depression and anxiety in our life is rooted in the fact that we have put our hope in something other than God. The way things ought to have gone. The people that we used to have. The things we thought we'd have by the time we were this age. We root our hope in those things. We fail to see the real meaning of Christmas, which is hope in God. So my prayer, if you're here or you're listening on Facebook, you're wrestling with depression, my prayer for you, and I'm going to pray this in just a moment, is that you will see this cycle of yearning and groaning and preaching as valuable enough to just keep doing it over and over and over again. Because there will be a day when you will again praise Him. My prayer for you, Christian who may have friends who are wrestling through depression and darkness, is that we will stop creating the impression that we're always supposed to have a smile, that we're always supposed to be happy. And that we will let people experience the emotional range that the Bible teaches us to experience. Because we will never really be fully orbed, mature Christians until we learn how to deal with all of the emotions that we feel. That's what the psalm is for. The reality is, that's what Christmas is for. Now, you may not have this hope at all. This may be the first time you've heard a message, anything like this, that says that the gospel is about hope. Friends, let me encourage you with the good news of the gospel. The gospel is about hope. Hope that you could be rescued and changed. Hope that you could be saved from the sin that has totally train wrecked your life to this point. Hope that you could be redeemed and changed and look like the image of God that you're intended to look like. Hope that Jesus Christ has loved you enough that he came to earth to humble himself and take on the form of a servant, that you could live with him forever and have, even in the midst of the darkest times in your life, hope. If you want that hope, all you must do is turn from your sin, repent of that sin, and believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. The Bible teaches you will be saved.